Welcome to the Good Business Dufferin podcast, hosted by the Dufferin Board of Trade through our social enterprise, the Dufferin Biz Hub. Our podcast is based on our belief that small businesses have the power to drive positive change in our community. Whether you're looking to grow your business, strengthen our community, or hopefully both, we've got you covered. Hello, I'm Diana Morris, Executive Director of the Dufferin Board of Trade and the Dufferin Biz Hub. Today we're excited to welcome Kim Van Ryn from Branching Out Support Services. Kim and her team are setting an inspiring example of how businesses can not only thrive, but also make a meaningful impact in our community. We'll be talking about what it means to be a living wage employer, Rainbow registered, and the process of becoming a certified B-Corp, along with her advice for other businesses that want to follow a similar path. But before we dive in, we'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, Skorsky Web Design, for supporting the podcast and helping local businesses thrive while building up our community. Let's get started. Let's start by getting to know you, Kim. Can you tell us a bit about your background and what led you to create Branching Out Support Services?
Sure. So I started my career as a child and youth worker. Many months ago, I graduated from Humber College from the Child and Youth Work program. And in my early career, I did a lot of work for a private business called Carpeting Foster Homes. And I was a case manager, one-to-one support worker. I had a lot of different roles. I worked some admin at that, in that part of my career as well. So I think that my start in human services was a really solid one. And it was interesting because I worked for a private business, which is very similar to what I'm doing now with my own enterprise. So my background has always been in human services. I took a little bit of time off and worked in the culinary industry for a while. I needed a break from human services, as people who are immersed in the field often do. And when I entered into working for a company that had an adult day program for adults with disabilities and neurodiversities, I really found a piece of passion in my life that I don't think I totally knew I had before. So that was exciting. And it was a calling for me to start branching out with a group of really, really dedicated local support workers, and it's grown a lot in the last 5 years. But the inspiration behind it was to offer support to people with neurodiversities in the way that I was learning that support could be offered. During that time, I also went to university for the first time when I was in my late 30s and got a degree in human services, and then went on from there to do a postgrad in trauma-informed care and counseling, which has, again, just built another really important part of who we are at Branching Out and what we're doing there. So that's a brief history.
That's amazing. What a varied background you have, and what amazing educational background you have to get where you are. So you opened Branching Out, so you said 5 years ago?
Yes.
And what is the mission? What does Branching Out do?
So Branching Out Support Services, we have our 5-year anniversary on December 1st, which feels like a real accomplishment and something that I hope that all of our teams are incredibly proud of. But at Branching Out, our mission is to provide social services and supports to people who have brain differences. And we refer to that group of people in our community as people who have neurodiversities, so a brain difference, and to offer them services that they have designed, curated, that they have a voice and a choice in. And in that way, we are understanding and serving people with brain differences in a way that really hasn't been done before, with the assumption that people who are disabled can have a voice and a choice in their own lives. And so in direct opposition to the institutionalization movement, where people with disabilities were hidden away, we are really committed to community-based programming to offer people opportunities that they can thrive.
That's amazing. So not only are you helping people in the community, but you're also taking steps to help your own staff. And I noticed recently that you are a living wage employer, Rainbow registered, and very recently a certified B-Corp. Can you tell us what those certifications mean?
Yeah. So what's really different about Branching Out as a social services organization that has a social mission and a very clear set of financial commitments that is also a for-profit business. This is not a construct that you often see in the field of human services, almost all organizations would be considered nonprofits or charities. And that's very common in the helping profession and for helping organizations. So a lot of my counterparts, the people I work with and partner in the field of developmental services or human services in general, are nonprofits, which also means that they could be part of a ministry in the provincial or federal structure, which means there are also checks and balances through the CRA, through the Ministry of Community, Children and Social Services, that a lot of my counterparts in the field already have built into their structures. As a private organization that serves an incredibly vulnerable population, I needed to find another way that we could build that kind of trust with the community, and especially with our customer base. People who have neurodiversities, especially if they're non-speaking, are at a very high rate to be victimized. So as I looked for these other ways that we could kind of check and balance so that we had outside eyes looking inside. And again, that's not something that's really popular in the private industry, right? The reason why people go into private industry is because they would like to do something their own way. And I appreciate that kind of thought and innovation. But when we were doing that, we were saying, but we're going to do things our own way with people. And we have to be very, very careful about how we treat people who are working for us, who we're serving. And I needed to invite outside eyes to look in on us, to prove that transparency, to say we are actually doing what we say we're doing. So the living wage took us a number of years to be able to get up to that point. The living wage in Dufferin County is $20.90 an hour. I think it's Dufferin and Wellington, actually. And so we were able to get to a point. I would encourage companies to look into the living wage in Ontario. It's a nonprofit that helps businesses get certified. When we couldn't do it right away, they also allowed us to create a plan that outlined the very last person that we kind of needed to get up to that pay grade, how we could do that. So they helped us set goals also so that we could financially meet those goals and continue to meet them in this economy. And it's very interesting for us because our customer base is on a fixed income. So as the economy changes, inflates, deflates, all of those things, although our staff need to be kept at the rate of the economy, we are servicing a group of people who are on fixed incomes. And so this becomes a very big tension, and the living wage people actually helped us work this out. So that was an important one for me. Also because my counterparts in the nonprofit have government funding in order to subsidize wages that we don't get, but it's important for everyone to know that we're working hard on that. The Rainbow Registry piece was a bit of a no-brainer for us. We have always been incredibly open to all differences, samenesses, all people who want to come into our space, but we also wanted to be very explicit about that. We have a number of people on our staff who identify as 2S LGBT plus community members. We have a number of participants within, and we also know there is a very strong correlation and intersectionality between neurodiversity and people who are 2S LGBTQ plus identifiers. So we just wanted that to be really explicit, although it is part of the B-Corp certification to kind of be able to say we are open to and can service. And but there were really interesting things in the Rainbow Registry that I didn't, not that I didn't know about, but again, that I hadn't made explicit in our business. Like, do we have an actual statement around pronouns? And we didn't, right? And I was like, oh yeah, we're totally fine with it. But that's not something I ever thought about to say. This is your choice. And if you choose not to use it here, that's okay too, right? And just to make it very explicit in our staff guidebook, in our materials. The B-Corp was most definitely the biggest one we undertook. I was actually just at a B-Corp meeting where they onboard new B-Corps. There were probably 40 new companies on this call. And we did this game where it's like, put your camera on if you finished your B-Corp within the last 6 months. It was all these different things. And they said, put your camera on if you did the B-Corp assessment and certification yourself. And 5 people out of the 40. Everybody else had teams because they're big corporations working on these, right? So that was a year-long undertaking. And the attention to detail that B-Corp requires was overwhelming at times. I had the great pleasure of speaking to the other owner of a B-Corp in Dufferin County, so she gave me a lot of advice around that. The B-Corp community is fabulous. They're there to help you. They're not there to trip you up. But the requirements are huge, as they should be. This is an accreditation body, but we are so very happy to report that we are amongst the first 10,000 in the world.
It's amazing.
I think they're going to tip over 10,000 this year.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
I know it was a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
Just so everyone's aware, B-Corp, what is a B-Corp?
Yes. So that's a good question. Those of us who are in the lingo are throwing around all the jargon. So the B in B Corp stands for benefit. So it's a benefit corporation. And the idea behind B Corp is it's a global accreditation platform. And what they do is they look into the social, financial, and environmental components of your business to check for ethics, clarity, all of these things. And many companies who have more environmentally damaging cultures, like for, say, the coffee industry can have a lot of environmental degradation. Often coffee companies will onboard with B Corp and work to heavily reduce that. So we didn't have a lot of those pieces in our company. We actually needed to look at pieces where we really needed to ramp things up to be able to meet some standards. And those were things around our infrastructure. So around how we train staff, how we manage staff bonuses, one of the parts, which is an important environmental part, is like how compost comes in and out of our facility. Are we utilizing all municipal services as far as compost recycling? They look into so many details. And the reason being is so that corporations can be aligned. There's now an aligned group of corporations, nearly 10,000 of them, whose main goal is to use the economy as a source for good. And so whereas capitalism can make the corporation a very challenging place to be, that's about greed and maybe not about people, B Corp is saying that in any industry, not just human services, but any industry at all, we can use the economy as a force for good. We have always believed that, but we wanted that to be very explicit, and also to be able to say that in social services, we can do this from a corporate perspective. We can do it with a lot of choice, and we can do it very, very ethically. And so that is the reason why we wanted to go towards B Corporation. But B Corp is a global accreditation body, and it is across industries. And we've done some really interesting things in order to get and sustain that certification, including changing our bylaws and our corporate articles and changing banks, which was one of the unexpected but massive jobs that we had to do. So we now bank with a credit union instead of one of the big five. We can be a little bit more sure that our investments are in industries that we're comfortable with.
So B Corp basically touches from what you're saying, every
really
aspect
does.
of your business, down from the compost to the banking to the financial.
It really does. So we transparently share banking information with them, not actual numbers in bank accounts, but where we bank and how we do that banking, and how our financial structures work. So the articles of the branching out corporation have been changed to say that there can be no shareholders in our company. There can only be stakeholders, and that nobody will ever benefit financially over any other person within the company. And our personal dedication to that is that profits made are recycled back into the system so that more and more people can access it and can have choice about their service.
Amazing. Sounds like it was a lot of work and a lot of writing and a lot of policies and a lot of reviewing. What impact have all these changes had on you and your business?
We're very new into this, so I don't think I have actually explored all of the things that B Corp can do for us. And so the way that's being managed is that they have these onboarding meetings, and then they have more localized groups where you can get connected with other people. So it helps you speak a common language with people when you're looking for suppliers and businesses to partner and collaborate with. And I think this is how we will start to have that network grow in not only our country, but in the world. So that's one of the big benefits, is that you're immediately connected with people who have the same business goals as you. And so it makes competition in certain fields quite different than it was before. And it makes us look more towards collaboration about how we can use the economy to fuel the social missions that we have. It also is recognizable and will become more and more recognizable as the wellness economy becomes something that's more accepted in our capitalized economy. And so it's recognizable and it builds trust because anyone can go on the internet and download our assessment and say, yes, they're doing this. No, they're not doing that. What's going on here? So it adds a level of transparency that the people that we are servicing or who may want to get service from us, but aren't really sure, can go and have a place to look.
So are you actively seeking out other B Corps to do business with, like for your suppliers and things like that?
Yes. So we would probably put those people closer to the top of the list if we were looking to do collaborations and connect with people, because we just know that we're not going to come into contact with people who have very opposing values. It's really about a value system in business. And I think the value system in business, especially in small business, is becoming more and more important all the time.
I agree. So what was the most challenging part of getting the certification?
Probably the attention to detail. And there were some parts of it. So full transparency, we did hire a lawyer to help us with the changing of the articles of incorporation, which you can do on your own. We did not feel we had the expertise for it. And we also had an investment readiness fund grant. And this was part of a grant. We did 3 different activities. And so managing all the moving parts at the end, where we had a B Corp consultant on board, we had a lawyer, and we had myself, and we were all figuring out the last little details. That final push was probably the most challenging because we were like, we're there. We just have to submit like 3 more Excel charts. And we've done about 75 Excel charts to date. So it is. And I think this is what most people say, especially if you're doing it on your own and you don't have a team. Because when you have a team, everyone gets assigned a section. Yeah. And I think there's 6 or 8 sections. And so that last push where you're so close, but you still have to do like a few more detail checks. But also, I'm glad they do those detail checks because I can tell you every detail is checked.
So for another business who's thinking about it, they may want this, but they're a little bit nervous about the workload, is there any advice you could give them?
Just trust the process the whole way through, because at times it is a little bit like you're a little lost in the weeds. I don't know. I often thought back to like my university days where you knew you had a 22-page essay that you had to write, but you had no idea how you were, and you just chunk it out. And somewhere in the middle, you're like, I have no idea what I'm actually talking about here anymore. And it comes back online eventually and it all works. I think that's a little bit like this process is if you have access to somebody else who's done it, and any business owner, you're welcome to give me a call, because I had someone who did that for me. And Heritage B in Dufferin County, I was able to phone the owner and I emailed her and said, I'm thinking about doing this. And she goes, let's have a Zoom. It was during COVID. Let's have a Zoom. So we had time to have a Zoom, and I emailed her a year later and I said, Debbie, I did it. It's done. Like, it's in the bag. But for her to say, and she told me the same thing, she was like, it's going to get tough. Probably. She told me some stories about things that were a bit more challenging for their industry. And she goes, but they're there to help you. So don't give up. And that was a good attitude to take into it, and one that served me well. But having somebody else to talk to who actually knew what it was about. We also worked with Lairday Consulting around that time to do a theory of change for BOSS. And Lairday Consulting is a social enterprise nonprofit that consults with other social enterprises, and they have a B Corp. So again, I was able to talk to a few people there and say, this is what I'm in the middle of right now. And they were like, oh yeah, keep going. So that kind of encouragement from someone who's been there, find your people.
And you said it was a year later you got back to her. Did it take pretty much a full year to do it? Wow. And then after you submit everything, does it take a while to get the approval, or are you submitting as you go?
No, you submit everything in one big chunk. And it's so I did the assessment first. I actually took a week-long sabbatical to do that. And then Mark, who was our lawyer from Green Economy Law, if anyone's looking for a good lawyer who supports the B Corp process, I would highly recommend Mark. Then he and his paralegals worked into any places. He helped me with the rewrite of the bylaws. That would have just been something above my pay grade. And he helped with the final submission of everything. And then we met with then our consultant quit We had a consultant and they quit, and B-Corp had to email us and say, it's going to be 6 weeks because they had to hire and train someone new. It happens. We're all doing business here. And so then we had an actual person who went over the last few things that they were just like, no, we need a bit more evidence here. Do you want to keep this? And that part takes about 6 weeks for another human to actually go through everything that you've done on the computer. That's probably been through an algorithm as well. Yeah.
So is 12 months sort of a standard? Is that what you think most of the organizations?
I don't know. I think it's probably 6 to 12 months. If you have a team working on this, you could cut, but I think normally they do say count on it being about 6 to 12 months.
And there were a lot of policies you had to rewrite during that.
We had a fairly good policy base, but yes, there were some things, especially around environmental, because that's not our industry, that we just hadn't kind of really thought of. And because of the nature of how our business opened, which was 4 months before COVID, we were missing some real infrastructure stuff because 4 months into our startup, we stopped everything that we knew how to do and tried to figure out something else. So we were missing quite a bit of infrastructure in writing, concrete, that we're able to timestamp and say, we're going to review this again in a year, which is what every other nonprofit in the world would do, like in our industry, right? So it actually helped us double back a little bit to just clean up some stuff that had happened during COVID. So we didn't have to rewrite too much, but we'd had to produce some new.
Yeah. Now, if someone is not quite ready to be a B Corp, but still wants to do good in the community, is there any sort of intermediate steps you would recommend?
Yeah. So if you go to the B Corp website, and it may bounce you to a website called B Lab, which is like a lab. So B Lab. And yes, there are like pre-activities that people can do who are interested in B Corp. You can just download the assessment and it's pages and pages, and look through it and think about, is there an area that you wanted to focus on? Because some companies work for a number of years before even trying to go for it. I had a pretty good idea. So the deal with B Corp is that there's a score of 120 and you need to be able to get 80 or more in order to be certified. And then there are still areas, obviously, that nobody ever gets to perfect, right? So some people have to work to get to 80. There are also a number of companies, and I think there's at least one in in Ontario, but I know there's a number in the States of companies that help companies get to B Corp. So you can get a trained B Corp consultant. I think if there's social activities, I don't think B Corp Ontario has any, but in the States, it's really common. And I think you, as a business leader, you could probably join in on those to meet they want to encourage people quite openly to become B Corps. So yeah, if you go to the B Corp website, there are lots of things you can read. There's so many articles. The resources are brilliant. And that would probably be people's invitation to look at other websites about social enterprise in general. So like InnoWeave, Social Enterprise Toronto, those kinds of places that would really kind of help you do those pre-activities if you're getting ready for B Corp.
That's great. Other things that you're able to help businesses with, if a business is wanting to improve their accessibility, I know that's an area that you specialize in.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the areas that we've really worked into besides frontline service over the last 5 years as we've really kind of developed branching out is advocacy and education. So we're doing a lot of training around accessibility for any type of business. So not necessarily within human services, although we're more than happy to do that, but really across business sectors. So we've worked with a few businesses to be able to train them mostly in neurodiversity, although I am really starting to open up. I just did an accessibility competency from Carleton University, so that I am really starting to open up around all areas of accessibility. But my training in particular is around neurodiversities, and that may be neurodiverse customers that people are serving. People may have neurodiverse people on their staff teams, students coming in to work with them, whatever it may be. We know that 26% of the population in this country is disabled, so we are going to be experiencing disability and neurodiversity. So we're training people. So I'm doing that with private businesses, with nonprofits, also training municipally for the town of Orangeville, the region of Peel, hopefully Center Wellington soon as well. And so we're supporting businesses to support their neurodiverse customers. And most people that we have done training with has been very effective. And they've really felt a newfound confidence, especially if they have customers who don't speak or who have family members who don't speak, need alternate forms of communication, and that may be able to just make very simple changes in an environment to allow more people to be able to access it with safety and comfort. So that's been a really exciting development in my career that I don't necessarily know I saw coming, but has been truly one of my favorite things that I do now is being able to work with people about this and use all that experience.
That's fantastic.
To share. Yeah.
Helping local businesses help the community.
Absolutely.
And you can come in and do an accessibility audit for a business. That's an awesome opportunity.
Yeah. So like most businesses can use all the resources that we have through the Ontarians for Disability Act or the AODA. But yes, we can come in and do some very specific idea generation around spaces, especially in towns that have a lot of historic spaces like ours, can be very tricky around accessibility and sometimes around sensory types of environments. So we can come in and look at what's happening and how we might be able to modify some of those things without capital projects, because that can also be really tricky. And so, yeah, we are doing that kind of work as well.
So if a business wanted to get you to do that, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so just emailing us through our website or at info@branchingout.com or myself at kim@branchingout.com. Just drop us a line and we can send you what we have available as far as training. In general, it's a 3-hour training with the accessibility audits would be tacked on to that. So we'd come right into your space if that's what people need. So those are all individually designed with the company that we're planning on working with. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. I learned so much from our conversation. I hope everyone else did. Thank you for joining us on the Good Business Dufferin podcast. A big thank you to Kim for sharing her insights and inspiring us with the work Branching Out Support Services is doing. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with others who are passionate about making a difference in our community. Until next time, keep doing good business and building a stronger community.
This episode is sponsored by Skorsky Web Design, your project-based WordPress web designer and developer. Get worry-free help when you need it.